So how many of you have seen the new Star Wars movie, The Force Awakens, over Christmas? It's a fair number of you. Now, if you haven't seen it and you're not nuts over Star Wars or sci-fi, you won't want to see this one either, because it's truly more of the same in the Star Wars kind of whole empire that has developed over the years. But if you don't like Star Wars and you haven't gone to see it, you are definitely in a minority, okay? Because The Force Awakens, the newest installment in the Star Wars, it's not a trilogy. It's, well, how many are there? 5 or 7 now? 7. So it's this one. The Force Awakens is the movie that reached $1 billion in sales, the fastest of any movie ever produced. $1 billion in sales, and by the time I looked at the numbers just a couple days ago, it was up to $1.7 billion in sales for that movie. It's just absolutely astounding. This one, of course, is in 3D as well. If you've liked the other ones, like I say, it's really more of the same. I saw the first one, okay, and then I think I've seen some of the others along the way, but I haven't really paid a whole lot of attention. But I remember the incredible hype around the first one, and I remember it. I liked it. It was really, really good, okay, and I had a sense of the hype going around this one. I thought, I really need to go and see this one as well. So I did go to see it, and it is good. If you like the characters and the humor and the adventure of all the other ones, this one is just in keeping with that. But the real reason I went to see the movie is, as your cultural and spiritual critic in residence, I knew that I had to go see it, and I actually consider it as part of my work to go and see it. You'll be relieved to know that I do not put in expense claims for movies, mind you, but I knew that I had to go and see it, and I wasn't disappointed at all. The reason I love Star Wars and I love sci-fi, and I have since I've been a teenager, I think is because some of the most creative reflecting and pondering on matters of theology and faith actually are expressed and presented in a lot of these vehicles, right? So Star Wars, and the movie I really, really loved hugely in recent years was Avatar. I don't know how many of you remember Avatar, but that was just an awesome film as well. And Avatar, if you haven't seen it, go James Cameron, is that who it was? James Cameron's movie Avatar. If you haven't seen it, pick it up. It's incredible on the big screen. But it's a must-see for any of you who like the Star Wars genre. So go see Avatar as well. But both Avatar and Star Wars also are movies that are reflecting quite deeply on our human understandings of the big picture, the something more, and ultimately they talk about God. And so that's the part about the films. I like the action and the adventure too, but it's the way contemporary culture is reflecting on the deeper realities of life that always captures my imagination. So I'm quite intrigued as well about how Star Wars does that. And if you actually go and because I haven't seen, or I don't remember seeing them all, I can't keep all the characters and all of that tracked in my mind, so you go to Wikipedia and you do a search on the Force for Wikipedia, and you see that there is quite a profound kind of theological underlay to how that whole aspect of the Star Wars movies comes out. And this Sunday is just meant to be a little bit of an introduction, a teaser into the Star Wars genre. But next Sunday, I'm going to actually get into what the Force actually represents big time in Star Wars. And there's a whole sermon. There's several sermons that could be done on just the Force itself and the implications of the Force and the understanding of the Force in the movie for our understandings of God. But But today is a little bit more of an intro to all of that, and so I want to step back from Star Wars for just a second and point to a couple of other cultural events that have happened in the world just recently. And the other one I want to refer to is the death of David Bowie this last week. So how many of you grew up listening to David Bowie? Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Wonderful, wonderful album. I just loved it when it came out, and Ziggy Stardust represents this alien who comes to Earth to share a message of new life and new hope, right? So I grew up with David Bowie, although in the last quite a few years I haven't really been following him all that closely. But what interests me about David Bowie is he too he's been a profound shaper of culture, but he's also had a lot to say about theology and spirituality and big picture stuff as well. And it's quite interesting that, of course, his last album or CD called Black Star, he timed it to coincide with his death, right? And it's a very theological and very, very spiritual album, although it's also incredibly dark, and I really don't like it a whole heck of a lot. But it is profoundly spiritual. And David Bowie's earlier life, as well as Black Star, and one of the key tracks on Black Star is a song called Lazarus. Do you know that name? Fellow Christians here at Bedford United Church, right? So Bowie reflects very deeply in that album a belief in a larger life, a larger reality, a belief that in some form or fashion his life does survive death and he will live on, right? And so, as with Star Wars, it strikes me that David Bowie as well are two cultural expressions, two manifestations of and shapers of culture that have a lot to say about God and faith and the hereafter and the bigger picture, and they, with a great deal of openness, great deal of thoughtfulness. Which brings me to the second thing I wanted to sort of slip into the talk this morning, and that was, some of you may have heard The Current on Tuesday morning, I think it was, with a conversation with a story about Greta Vosper. And so Greta Vosper is this United Church of Canada minister in Ottawa who's been getting an awful lot of press in the last few years with her stance that the church should ditch God, and she's basically proclaimed that she is an atheist. And I find it very ironic that people like David Bowie and Star Wars are very much embracing God, whereas here we have a United Church minister who's getting a lot of press because she's totally rejecting God and saying, I don't believe in God any longer. Now, to be fair to Greta tries to clarify that the God she doesn't believe in is the supernatural, theist, interventionist God that you see a fair bit of in the Bible. It's true. I spoke with the court of the Presbytery, Halifax Presbytery this week, and basically, though, what I said is that I think Greta has a real problem. And we were the first church to host Greta when her first book came out, right? And here in the Maritimes, I think we were the only church that would host her when she first came out. But my challenge with Greta is this. If you don't believe in a supernatural, interventionist, theist God, that's fine, then just be clear. But you don't have to ditch the word God altogether because you don't believe in that kind of God. If, on the other hand, you don't believe in any larger ultimate reality whatsoever, then leave the United Church of Canada. She should. She's either being disingenuous by saying, let's ditch God altogether and the church shouldn't be about God, it should just be a humanist organization. In that case, that's not what the church is all about and you should leave the church. If, on the other hand, what you don't believe in is a particular type of God, then stop using the word being an atheist, because it just confuses everybody all the heck. Okay. It's bad theology, and Greta also refers to Dawkins and Richard Dawkins and many of the scientists. Actually, Gloria. Gloria and I were having a bagel the other day at Ziggy's, which is kind of, we didn't mention how he came by the name of Ziggy's Bagels next door to the church, right? And that's this bagel shop right next door to the church, right? And the owner is quite a philosophical kind of person, actually. And we got into this long conversation about science and faith over bagels, me and Gloria. We just had a whale of a time, except that we had things we needed to do, and he wanted to keep talking and talking and talking and talking, right? But they make great bagels, so this is a plug for Ziggy's next door, and they've got a good name, so go have a bagel at Ziggy's. But he was also critiquing Richard Dawkins and other atheists, other scientists who declare themselves to be atheists, saying they are both bad philosophers and poor theologians, and their science is also very poor as well. So, and what we got into the conversation around science is that there are scientists who now say, well, that we don't need God to explain the universe can just have popped out of nothing. But when you actually look at the nothing that they say the universe popped out of, they're actually talking about there are these quantum fluctuations, these micro conditions prior to the universe out of which the universe came into being. It's not really nothing that they're talking about. There was still a something that the universe emerged out of, or it emerged out of some kind of prior condition, a previous Big Bang of some sort, or what have you. So it's disingenuous and it's bad science for Dawkins and the others to be saying that science can prove the universe can come into existence out of nothing. They have proven no such thing whatsoever. And they also refer to bad theology, the same way that Greta Vosper does. The God who is this supernatural, interventionist, theistic being is a God that the majority of theologians in the world today, including the majority of United Church ministers, don't believe in. Okay? But that does not mean that we don't believe in God. Just to set the record straight, I believe in God. But our understanding of God has to change and evolve. And Nick, I gave you that wonderful first reading. Didn't you think, David, what on earth are we doing reading this reading? Moses going and getting all the people of Israel together and saying, go out, you didn't do your job, you didn't slaughter all the women and children, you got to go and slaughter them too. In the early phases of the Bible, you have this description of a God who tells Moses to do those things, to do these terrible things. It's sort of what the Islamic jihadists also refer to, that kind of a God, right? 500 years or so later in the Bible, that kind of God has been very much displaced, and a new understanding of God has emerged. A God who loves justice, who loves humility, and then Jesus, and who wants somebody who is people who are committed to compassion for one another. And then by the time you get to the New Testament, that understanding of God in Jesus and Paul becomes much more universalist. So that the God of the Old Testament is a supernatural, sort of super kind of person who is very associated with a particular kind of tribalism. God is identified with the Israelite people, and God will fight and kill and smite down anyone who is opposed to them, and that's the kind of God you see in parts of the Bible. And of course, it's easy for Greta or for Dawkins and scientists to say, yeah, if you believe in that kind of God, you're nuts, and all theology and faith is bogus, and the church should be toast. But no, that's not the kind of God we believe, and it's not the kind of God that the Bible actually believes in. You see an evolution in people's thinking about God throughout the whole Bible, a profound kind of thinking to a much deeper, a wider, a more profound understanding of God that emerges. What the ancient Israelites did experience, and what people throughout time have experienced and still today have experienced are mystical experiences of numinous power. Times and experiences when people have a sense of, yes, there is something profound and deep. There is a power and a moreness that shapes the universe. I've had a few experiences of those in my life. I've talked with many of you, and you've had those kinds of experiences too. Or you've had experiences of profound oneness and deep, deep peace and serenity and a recognition that the whole universe is connected and part of something larger. How many of you have had serendipitous kind of synchronicitous experiences where some kind of remarkable coincidence just converges with something in your life? And you were talking about that with us, Morris, just your wonderful adventure on the Concordia. And it was it was an incredible adventure. So there are all sorts of moments and experiences in our lives. And that people like David Bowie and the founders of Star Wars, they kind of get it. There is something more. There's a depth and a vastness, a profundity to life that we cannot necessarily totally explain, but we sort of work at it. It's part of the human adventure and journey to try and figure out this larger reality in which we're embedded. But we know that there's a profound something beyond us. And the great, great mystics and the great spiritual giants of humankind, like Jesus, have said that something is also characterized as close as we can get to it by the human quality of love. And I often talk to you that love is not just an emotional feeling, but it's a relational force that connects the whole universe together. The whole universe is built around relationship, from subatomic particles to the stars up in the heavens to our human relationships as well. And so the nature of this creative force and power and reality at the heart of the universe is characterized also by relationship, which we also describe as love. So don't pay attention to ministers who say God is dead. And don't pay attention to scientists who say God is dead. Nothing has been proven to that effect. In fact, the majority of the human race has got it right. God is real. God does exist. God is a profound and incredible reality, and the spiritual giants of the human race have all proclaimed that reality. But recognize that our understanding of that reality is changing and transforming as time goes on, and that's just part of the evolution of the human race. And it's part of our evolving and maturing human understanding, which is what that reality ultimately intends. I believe, this is my personal take on it, that ultimate reality is seeking to become more and more conscious and self-aware in human forms. And our changing, growing understandings of that relationship is all part of that process. So, here's your job for the next week. Next Sunday, I'm going to unpack the Force and what Star Wars actually suggests might be some differing understandings and new ways of thinking about this God reality as it connects with the Force. I'm not going to agree with everything, but I think it's interesting the kinds of things that Star Wars is suggesting are relevant to the Force. And one of the interesting things, just to give you a bit of a teaser, is can the Force be used for darkness? Can it also be used for goodness? So we'll get into that. So this week, to quote Mission Impossible, if you choose to take on this mission, think about God. Is God the old gray-bearded man up in the sky who has favorites in this world and lets good things happen to the people who pray to God, but bad things happen to the people who don't pray to God? Is that the kind of God that you believe in? What kind of God do you believe in? And next week we'll start to unpack that in terms of a little bit of what Star Wars says about that, and then I may from time to time talk about God even some more and talk about other understandings. In the meantime, namaste. And may the Force be with you. Amen.
Give me your